Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Shaw,
Mrs. Willbrand.
coming at you from Castle Willbrand, and it's a castle over here. It's crazy. Anyway, we're going to get into Learning Objective 2.2 today. We're going to talk about state and local reform. Super exciting, giving the people more power. You're welcome.
I do like that part.
Yeah, it's perfect. Let's do it.
Okay. All right, so we have some objectives for you. By the end of this lesson, you guys will be able to explain how local and state governments led the progressive movement and identify laws passed that will give more power to voters in elections. All right, so there are problems everywhere. Lots of problems. So many problems. All the problems. So city jobs are dangerous. We talked about this in the last lecture video and at the end of industrialization. We talked about child labor before this as well. Children are working really long hours, trying to help their families survive. Children go to work, they come home, they give their money to their parents. Political bosses had complete control of cities, and robber barons made mountains of money while workers struggled to survive. Again, that gap between the rich and the poor was getting wider and wider and wider. Okay?
And again, it's interesting that we talk about the differences between like captains of industry and robber barons. I mean, they were the same people. Like it was basically just two ways to look at like these entrepreneurs who had become very, very wealthy and now led huge companies. But again, it was kind of two sides of the same coin. So the state and local reforms that you're going to really start talking about, they're going to start small, and that's what I really tell my kids a lot is like if you really want to get involved in changing your life and changing the life around you, is really get involved in like local politics, because that's what really actually affects your day-to-day life much more so than say like the presidency. But not a lot of people vote in the local elections, even though that's actually far more important. Anyway, so these reforms began influencing local and state governments a long, long time before the federal government started to change. So progressives during this time are going to help pass laws that are going to end child labor and destroy the power of political bosses, and then protect and expand the power of the vote. We talked about with the political bosses, like since there was no secret ballot yet, they could exchange favors for votes, and then they would know if you had voted for their person or not. And so that was very illegal during the time, but people were scared and they were doing pretty much whatever it took to survive.
All right, so political bosses of cities had complete control. Cities do begin to fight back during this time. They create two new forms of local government that destroy the power of the boss. First, the city commissioner model, which is where the city elects several commissioners who then elect a head commissioner to oversee projects and things like that. And I think it should be S-E-E.
It should. Yes, that is a mistake.
Woo!
We're not perfect.
We're not perfect. And then the city council manager model, which is where the city elects a council who selects the specialist, which is the city manager who has special training on city government. So St. Louis has a city council manager model.
All right, so I don't want you to write this, but we're just giving you some specific examples of the things. And I believe the next one is state government reforms. So don't write either of the next two slides. Just listen and learn with us. Okay. So Hazen Pingree is from Detroit. He was the mayor there. He created a fair tax system, which was more money from the wealthy. Again, like if you talk about a flat tax rate, the wealthy pay the same rate as the poor, and that's really not fair considering like the percentage of money left over is really quite large for wealthy people. Mm-hmm. Whereas for the poor, if they're paying the same tax rate as well as the wealthy, they have pretty much nothing left. And they also are going to lower transportation costs. Again, transportation is more of it's going to be seen as more of like a human right during this time. And like having high transportation costs is going to be harder to keep a job, things like that. Also, they're going to build public electric plants, school parks, things like that are going to be better for the people. And again, this is you really see the end of laissez-faire capitalism here too. Again, this is the government getting involved actively to really change people's lives. Tom Johnson in Cleveland was a socialist mayor. And so again, kind of that word socialism there, like I want you guys to really remember that it's about kind of creating more equality than under a capitalist system. So the first thing he did was he converted to public utilities. So like that means that there were not private companies that were running, electricity and sewer systems and things like that. Like, in O'Fallon, like where I live, it's all public. It's like the city that controls that. Although I guess isn't Ameren still that's a private company, isn't it? So electricity is still owned by a private company, but that's not the case necessarily in other places. So in St. Louis or Missouri and Illinois it is, but not necessarily everywhere.
Speaking of modern day monopoly.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, there's not another option if you want to get electricity. You have to get it from Ameren. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Also, like I think in O'Fallon, also like Charter is like the only internet provider. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, we digress.
Good stuff.
Again, he's going to start allowing public meetings, again, giving the people more of a voice, and then allowed questions at meetings. Wow. That's really dangerous. I don't allow questions in my class.
No. Just kidding.
Just kidding.
All right. So state government reform. Again, don't write this either. We have Robert Follett. I want to pronounce that in a French way, but I won't. So he's of Wisconsin. Wisconsin becomes a starting point for a whole lot of reform. He asks the University of Wisconsin to help write laws. Government should be controlled by voters. Again, this is democracy, so the people should control the government, not the government controlling the government, right?
Or business controlling the government.
Well, business. Okay. I guess government does control
the government. Shouldn't control the government.
I'm so tired. And then he's going to tax railroads fairly. Remember, we talked a little bit about railroads, especially with the populist movement, really not being regulated, charging whatever they want. And so he's going to start trying to put a stop to that railroad corruption as well. We're going to see more reform governors in Texas, North Carolina, and a whole bunch of other states as well.
And you're eventually going to see these same kinds of reforms really adopted at the federal level, but that's going to take a lot longer. Again, the federal government is usually a lot slower. Mm-hmm. And that's, again, why I encourage my kids to really start paying attention to like your local politics, your state politics, because those are the ones that really affect you more than things at the federal level for the most part. Okay, so big elephant in the room. Children are working. A major issue for progressives is how do we get these children out of these dangerous working conditions? Again, we want to fix the working conditions definitely, but we don't want kids to be working anymore. So they at least not unsafely. So Louis Hine is going to be a major leader in this, and he's going to take a lot of photographs of children in these working conditions. And you'll see photographs like this one. Again, she's not working, and I'll just point out that this is kind of staged a little bit because she's just standing there. She's like not in the middle of working. Some other pictures will show you'll see them in the middle of doing their job. But again, he's going to take these pictures to show how bad the situation was. And then we got to figure out how to end child labor. So again, you see here the children working in this one. I'll use my mouse to show you. So this one's probably not staged, although this one, it looks partially staged, at least. Like the kid was like he'll take my pay if I don't stop sweeping.
Yeah, and you have to also look see how dirty, I'm pointing at the screen like you can see my finger. If you look how dirty the little boy's pants are and how dirty the kids look, I'm not saying that child labor was not that bad, because it was really, really bad, but he chose children that already looked really sad and then made them look sadder to try and drive his point home. And so that's probably what they looked like every day, but for the sake of his photographs, he did kind of dress them up a little bit.
He might not show photographs that showed kids
yeah.
This is super fun.
I'm having a great time, because they weren't.
Yeah. A couple more for you. Again, this one is a famous one of coal miners. And again, you can see that the kinds of things that they're doing. Like they have lanterns, like fire lanterns on their heads and things like that. Again, just really terrible conditions for anybody, but also definitely for kids. Newspaper workers. Is this a Newsies? This might be Newsies. I think this is. Again, same sorts of situations here. You see, kids just really working long hours, and Louis Hine is trying to bring that to the forefront of of the American, population. Make sure they know about it.
We are not promoting smoking in this slide.
True.
It's bad for you. So sorry about that. We had to pause our recording for just a minute. There was a meltdown upstairs. Everyone's fine. There was some poop, some milk. Everything's good.
Babies crying,
We're
adults crying. It's a mess up there.
Aaron, Mr. Willbrand he's a struggling. He told me we're not having any more kids when we're up there.
I don't know how you guys made it past the age of 1, to be honest with you. Moving on.
Hug your parents. Anyway, so why hire children? Well, you don't have to pay them as much, right? Because they do simpler tasks and they do less work, so you don't have to pay them as much. They have smaller features, so they can get into like the teeny tiny little crevices of the machines. So, especially true in like textile. So if threads would get caught into the machine, they could just reach their little teeny tiny hands in and pull whatever was blocking the machine out. Now, if you think about that, if something is jammed and you pull out what's jamming it, what's it going to do immediately? Right?
Unjam.
Unjam, start working. And so we see a lot of injuries that way. Immigrant families also have kids work to help out. So we see the rise of the National Child Labor Committee in 1904. And it's going to investigate the issue and set up free public school picture galleries to inform the public. Lewis Hine is going to be a member. We saw a bunch of his pictures just a few slides ago. And so they're going to inform the public of what child labor looks like in factories and hopefully get the public on board to fixing it. So,
and we usually associate muckrakers with journalists, but really it could be, photographers. There's a few other different kinds of professions that they could fall into.
Right.
All right, so we were successful. And by we, I mean, Miss Willbrand and I weren't there, but, Americans back then were successful. The muckrakers were successful. So they wanted to end child labor. The muckrakers, as I just said, are going to publish stories of child injury and death on the job. Again, if there's one thing that a lot of people care about, it is children suffering. And so they wanted to put an end to that. So by 1900, half of states required school for all kids. Hey, bad news for you guys. This is the reason why you guys are in school. I guess that's good news for you, because you could have been working in a factory, losing your limbs and things like that.
Instead, you're stuck with us.
Anyway, so by 1918, all states required school for kids. And then also laws were passed on how young workers could be, what jobs they could do, things like that. So that is, we finally have the end of child labor. I guess now, what, do you have to be 15? I think you might even be able to be a little bit younger than that, but like you have to get like permits and things like that. Yeah. So, all right.
Okay. So state government reform. So working hours are going to also be part of this big reform.
Pause. I'm not really worried about you guys getting the 2 court cases down.
I don't think you need the court cases.
Just make sure you get workers' compensation.
Yeah.
Continue.
And also, you don't necessarily need to write that down if you already have it in your vocab packet. I can't remember if it's in there or not.
I don't think it is. You should write it.
Write it down. All right. So progressives are going to sue big businesses for change. Not like pennies, but like to create change, right? Anyway.
That's funny.
I'm so tired. Anyway, there are a couple of court cases here that are going to argue that big states should protect citizens from big business, and argue what a minimum work day should look like hour-wise. Workers' compensation are laws passed that require payment by the business if the worker is hurt or killed. So before this, Mr. Shaw works in the factory, he loses his arm, he goes home, he is now one-armed Shaw, and loses his job, his family starves, that's the end of it. But with workers' compensation, the business has to pay for his medical and to make sure that he and his family are okay, even though he can't continue doing the job that he's doing because he was injured on the job.
So like if Miss Willbrand and I got hurt while we were teaching now, again, the school district would be required to pay us money but we would have to be doing normal teacher things. One thing that Miss Willbrand is really bad about is standing on chairs. We're not allowed to stand on chairs. So earmuffs, Dr. Keltner. I guess I should have said that first. Anyway, so if she fell down off of a chair that we're not supposed to be on, she wouldn't get workers' compensation. But if she hurt herself while she was lecturing, which would also be weird. She isn't very animated though.
Like if the projector cord electrocuted me or something.
Sure.
Weird.
There you go. That's good.
We have
or
a
like
pretty
if you
safe
got
job.
or if you got like sick, based on like conditions in the building or things like that, that would be that would fall under workers' compensation. All right, so the next thing we have to talk about is how do we reform elections? So we talked about the power of the political machines. We talked about the power of the political bosses, and you really need to understand that at the end of the day, voters really didn't have a lot of power to change government and to change their situation in life. So how do we fix that? Again, so there's a couple of different solutions, a number of different ones. The main ones you need to know are these 5. So the secret ballot, the initiative, referendum, recall, and the primary election. So I think we have definitions on the next page. Oh, look at that.
Look at that.
So I would go ahead and get all of these down, and you can write them just on the same area you have them. So the secret ballot, again, as I said, it is exactly what it sounds like. You are going to cast your vote in secret now. So like even now, like when Ms. Willbrand and I go vote in the next election in November, no one knows who we voted for.
And it's rude to ask.
It is rude to ask. But I mean, if you want to share it, I guess you could. But anyway, regardless, like that's why. Oh wait, remember that some people ask how you voted when you leave the ballot box, and those are called exit ballots. I almost said exit tickets. That's what we do in class.
That's what we do.
Exit poll. That's it.
Exit polls.
So nothing like that. Anyway, they're trying to get an accurate idea of who's going to win the election. So they're not trying to be rude. But anyway. So now your vote is secret. Nobody can punish you for your vote. There's no way that they could know who you voted for. Next one is initiative. So this is the ability for people to gather support, meaning signatures, to propose a law during an election. So like, for example, if Ms. Willbrand and I wanted to put a new, a new
stoplight
on
the
new
other
stoplight.
entrance on
Yeah, a new stoplight by the
Creek.
football field, so we can, like, it would
needs
be...
one.
to like help with traffic in that area. We could, write a law, an initiative is what it's called, get a bunch of signatures, and if we got enough signatures, that would be put on the ballot during the next election. And so that leads us to a referendum, which is a vote on that proposed initiative. Okay, so initiative and referendum are really tied together.
And an initiative is specifically a law that's created by the people, right? Otherwise, like if it's created in Congress, then it's really just a bill. But if it's created by just your normal people, then it's an initiative. And when we're talking about gathering support with signatures, those are petitions. And so people will create an initiative and then go out and petition, which is gather those signatures. And then referendum is voting on that initiative.
A very common one nowadays, especially, is people wanting to get they're writing initiatives about legalizing marijuana and like recreational marijuana, especially in Missouri. Like it's now legal medicinally, but not recreationally. And so a lot of people, like you'll see people standing out in by Walmarts and things like that, and they'll always ask you, like, are you a registered voter? And because they're trying to get your signature down, because if they get enough, they'll be able to put that on the ballot for the upcoming election.
Yeah, because you also have to be a registered voter and sign the petition in the county that you live in. Like I was in Colorado on vacation, and they wanted me to sign a petition there, and I couldn't because I wasn't a resident of Colorado. So they asked that for a couple of reasons.
Correct. Next one is a recall election. This is the ability of the voters to remove public officials before the end of their term by redoing the election. This really only applies to state and local governments. This does not apply to doesn't apply to us federally. So basically, if a mayor or a city councilman is not doing a good job, the voters can call a recall election. And I'm not exactly sure how they do that, to be honest with you. I imagine that it can be proposed, and they probably need like signatures, I would imagine. Like they would get, if they get enough signatures, kind of like an initiative, and then it gets to the ballot, and then if enough people vote that person out, then they're done, no matter where they're at in their term. Would you think that's probably right?
I think there's something like
Something like that. Well, maybe we can talk about it later in class. And the last one is the primary election. This is the ability for multiple candidates to run for the same political party, and the people then pick which candidate should run. So the primary election, to be honest with you guys, is actually a lot more important than the regular election. Basically, what was happening, people were just, they were going straight to the regular election. The political parties were picking who was going to run, and the people had no say. And so this was basically a way to kind of control that and make sure that people had a voice at every step of the way.
Looks good. All right, so state government reform continued. The 17th Amendment passes. This is a progressive era amendment where the people elect your senators. So before this, the people would elect the state legislature, which is like our Missouri Congress, and then they would choose our U.S. senators, because each state gets 2. And they would choose them, but the people felt that really takes some power away from the people, and since we're a democracy, the people should have the say and the people should have the vote. And so the 17th Amendment gives the people that say in the U.S. level, the federal level senators. And again, 2 senators are elected from each state as a whole, so they're pretty influential people usually as far as voting goes in Congress.
Basically what was happening was, and this is kind of shown in the political cartoon, that like if you wanted to be a U.S. senator, all you had to do was really pay off a lot of the state legislators. And if you just got enough, if you paid off enough of them, they would vote for you, and then boom, you're a U.S. senator now. So that's obviously super corrupt. People have no voice, and anybody could just become a senator without having to really answer to the people. So that's really bad, and the 17th Amendment fixes that.
All right, and that's it. We did it.
We did it. A little over 20 minutes. Sorry, guys. We appreciate you. Hey, see you in the next one.
Bye, guys.